Well, thank you, Melissa. And let's give Melissa a hand for providing awesome training opportunities for you guys. And you don't want to miss Stephen Shattuck. He is hilarious, and he also knows a lot about what he's doing. And so that should be a fun training for you as well. So thank you for coming, and thank you for welcoming me to your community. It's my first time trip to Nebraska. And I'm from Jamaica, so the temperature is a little bit different, even though I hang out in South Florida. But, you know, one of the things we don't get down there is a change of the seasons. And so as I was driving from the airport here, it was a reminder that, you know, we have so much to be grateful for. And life really is full of seasons, even when you're dealing with donors. And so, you know, lucky you, you get to have 4 seasons, even if one of them lasts a little bit too long, right? All right. So today we're going to talk about how to steward your Giving Day donors. And so you're getting ready for the big give, and we want to make sure that you have all the skills in place and the resources you need to turn those donors not only to big Give Day donors, but into loyal donors to your organization who give to you several times a year. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Oops. So we're going to learn about retention and stewardship and why they matter. We're going to talk about how you create an awesome donor experience, and how do we continue the conversation with donors after the Giving Day starts. How many of you know what a retention rate is? All right, okay, this is great. You're in the right place. I'm going to teach you if you don't know already. So a retention rate is a metric that we use to see how many donors are we holding on to. So we calculate it by the number of donors who give in year 2 divided by the number of donors who give in year 1. So if we think about that, if you had 1,000 donors who gave to you last year and only 400 of them gave it to you this year, you would divide the 1,000 by the 400, right? And then that will give you your retention rate. So here we would be looking at about 40%, which is about the national average for nonprofits. So what does this mean for us really, other than a math lesson? You know, I've been married 27 years next month. And as any of you know, marriage is a roller coaster ride, you know? Some days you're on the top and the next day you're on the bottom. But my husband always jokes that it's cheaper to keep me after 25 years, you know? So he says it's cheaper to keep her. Well, the same is true of your donors, you know? It costs you less money to re-engage an existing donor than it does to go find a new one. So when we look at retention rates of 40%, that should make us go, whoa, something's wrong with this picture. 60% of people who give us a gift never give again. That spells trouble. So when you're thinking about developing sustainable funding for your missions, you want to start measuring your retention rate, because that's going to tell you how you're doing from one year to the next. And there's some things we can do to make sure that we keep our retention rate moving in the right direction. So this is an example of why retention matters. Supposing in year 1 you start out with 1,000 donors and you have an attrition rate of 20%. So attrition rate is the opposite of retention, right? So 20% of our donors are going to leave us. Well, in year 2, it's not so bad. You still have 800 of them, right? By year 3, 640, all the way to 5 years, you've got 328 left. So with a retention rate of 80%, and the flip side of that is an attrition rate of 20%, that's not too shabby. You've got 328 of the original 500 at the end of 5 years. But watch what happens when we go to the bottom of the slide. If we have an attrition rate of 60%, which is what we're talking about as a national average, you start out with 1,000 donors, and at the end of 5 years, we only have 10 left. That's a real problem, isn't it? And so if you've never paid attention to these metrics before, this is why you should. So here are some statistics that will make sure you can convince your boards to do all the things I'm going to suggest you do to convince them, win them over. It costs 6 to 7 times the cost of renewing a donor to find a new one. So if you're going to spend $10 to renew a donor, you can plan on spending $60 to $70 to find a whole new donor instead of renewing an existing one. So when we think about the scarce resources that we have to work with in fundraising and development, we want to go for the activities that are going to pay off with the highest amount of revenue, and retention is definitely that activity. I see some of you writing furiously. I'm happy to email you the slides afterwards. So, write if it helps you, but don't feel like you have to write everything that goes through. So, Dr. Adrian Sargent, have you ever heard of him? No? He's a nerdy guy that I love to follow because he speaks geek, and so do I. But he's really a professor of, and he's dug a lot into research on retention and what matters. And what he tells us is that if you can increase your retention rate 10 percentage points, you double the lifetime value of your donors, what they're going to give to you over their life cycle with you. So for example, if you have a retention rate of 40% and you can get it to 50%, then you will double the amount of money that you would have taken in. So if with a 40% retention rate, the lifetime value of those donors was $500,000, and you get that up just 10 percentage points, then you'll be looking at $1 million value in what they'll contribute in their lifetime cycle with you. So this is why it really matters. Again, the average retention rate is awful. It's under 50%. So if you follow fundraising consultants out there, one of the people you might have come across before is a guy named Roger Craver. And he says, what is now obvious to you and I, that taking positive steps to reduce gift and donor losses is the least expensive strategy for increasing revenue. So think about that. In your community, we're all thinking about how can we raise more money? Do we need to add events? Do we need to go after sponsors? And the answer is really in our donor file. How do we treat the people who give money to us? And that's where the real money is. So when we think about donors, we need to think about a funnel. And has anybody in here ever worked in sales? All right, so you know all about the sales funnel, right? So this is the same thing for donors. The vast majority of our supporters come in at the top level of the funnel where they're making a very small introductory gift to your organization. And as they grow in relationship with you, then they might make a second or a third small gift. They may even become what we call a mid-level donor, where they become a monthly donor to your organization. Then they may give you a major gift, a capital campaign gift, or dare we say even leave you something in their will through a planned gift. And so the only way we ever get to the bottom of the funnel is if we have a really good stewardship practice in place to deepen those relationships with those donors so they become more interesting to your cause, and also that they see they can achieve their philanthropic goals through you. So before we look about how we can entice donors and build relationships with them, let's look at some of the things that turn them off. So some people feel charity doesn't need them, right? Some feel that, gee, I gave money, but I have no idea what they did with that money. Others will say, wow, I don't even remember giving money to that organization. Some will just call you on your lack of service and communication. A lot of them will stop giving because they never received a thank you. And then some will say other nonprofits are more deserving. Regardless of what the donor tells you, this all comes down to one thing. Can anybody guess what it is? Communication. You know, none of these things are true. Every single one of us works for an organization that's doing great things, and that donors would be impressed by their work if they only knew. And so it's incumbent on us as nonprofit professionals to make sure that we score on the communication side so they never feel any of these things. Here's some other things you need to know about what drives donors nuts. And I can attest to the first one because with a last name like mine, can you imagine how many spellings I get? So misspelled names are a big turnoff for donors. So that's one of the things you want to make sure that when you're entering your donor information in a database or a spreadsheet, spell their name correctly. Take that 30 seconds it takes to go look them up and make sure you've spelled it correctly, especially if they have a last name like mine, because we don't want to lose a donor over something that's totally preventable. Another thing that turns donors off is late or missing tax receipts, you know. All of us are busy, and our donors are just like us. And if you're like me, scrambling to get my CPA to file my corporate tax return before jumping on a plane yesterday, sometimes it happens at midnight, just before it's due. You know, we're hustling, we're bustling, we're busy. So it's really annoying if they have to go hunting for tax receipts. So make it easy and make sure you're sending them on time. Number 3 is also one that I'm famous for. You know, I teach a lot of workshops, and people will go, I always give my email address, because if I can help you by answering a question, I'm happy to do it. But sometimes they'll turn around and add me to their mailing list as if I don't get enough junk mail to begin with. And it never ceases to amaze me, because in a workshop I'll say, the quickest way to make sure I never give you a dime is to add me to your mailing list without my permission, and still somebody always does it, right? So donors feel the same way. They don't want us to make assumptions about how they want to be connected with us. And so we need to ask their permission before we add them to a mailing list. They don't feel as differently about communications that go by US mail, because they figure then that you've paid something to tell them something, so it must be worth hearing. It's kind of crazy thinking, but it really is true. So just be mindful of that. Another big turnoff is mass mailers. So, you know, if you send out a newsletter and it says, "Dear friend," wait a minute, I donate to you and you don't even know my name, you lost me right at hello, right? So we want to make sure that when we do communicate with them, we're doing so in a very personal manner that uses their mail and feels like we're talking just to them over coffee, right? Over soliciting. This is another turnoff. We have a rule of thumb at Network for Good that says, for every letter you send someone asking for money, you need to have 3 touches between asks. And those 3 touches better be a thank you sent very quickly after their gift, preferably the same day or the next business day, an impact story or 2 that tells them how their gift has transformed someone's life, if you're a human service organization, or an animal's life, if you're an animal rescue group. So we need to make sure that we are reporting back to donors and thanking them, showing them impact, telling them how they can get more deeply involved before we ask them for money again. Otherwise, they feel like ATM machines, you know? And the last one, ignoring preferences. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was working at Catholic Charities in Miami, we had this one donor who used to send a check every year, and it wasn't even a big check. I mean, it was something like $50, you know? And we sent him in, or included him in our regular rotation of appeals. And at one point, we sent him a thank you letter for his gift. And we didn't even ask him for money. We were just thanking him for his gift. And he calls me up and chews me out because he said that he only wants to be solicited once a year. Now, I said, no problem, sir. I'll be sure to make a note of that. Thank you for giving, and totally deflated him. I could have said, but we sent you a thank you letter, not a solicitation. Doesn't matter. It's how he perceived it. So you have to make sure that even if the donor's perceptions don't align with ours, just like the customer is always right for a business, the donor is always right for us, even when they're wrong. The next thing we want to think about in terms of stewarding our donors is that donors have different needs. So if I'm a new donor and I don't know much about your organization, I need to know, who are you? You know, what do you want? Why should I trust you? Why do you matter? What's this got to do with me? And what's the rush? So these are essential questions that donors are looking to get answered, even if you don't know they're looking to get answered, right? When we're talking to an existing donor, on the other hand, they're looking first at, well, how did you use my gift? Because they already know who you are, so you don't have to remind them of that. Then they also want to know, hey, are you grateful? You know, it's kind of like when you give your teenagers gifts and they're driving you nuts. You sit there and you think, well, why did I go to all that effort to give them a gift if they don't even appreciate it, you know? We are the teenagers for donors, and the vast majority of us behave like teenagers as nonprofits in that we have poor stewardship practices. And so when we can cater to a donor's need to be appreciated, we're going to score a lot more gifts with them in the future. The next thing is when we write to them, they already know who we are, they know we're grateful, so the next question is, well, what do you want from me now, right? Do you want me to make another gift? Do you want me to volunteer? Do you want me to like you on social media? So when we write to them, we need to be very explicit about what we need. Sometimes they're even asking about the proof. So this is where when you send a thank you letter to a donor, it's always good to include a success story that's going to make them feel good, or even a phone call. So, you know, I at Catholic Charities reserved 1 day a week for donor appreciation. So I would spend time making phone calls, writing handwritten cards, all the things that we do. And I'll never forget that this one donor had made a gift of like $5,000 at our gala, and it was their first major gift. And so I literally picked up the phone and called them to thank them and said, you know, Tom, I thought of you this morning when this family came through the doors of our shelter. The father had just been laid off, the mom's sick, she's on disability, and they have 3 of the cutest kids ever. Nobody deserves to be in the position they were in, and it wasn't their fault. And I couldn't help but think that if it wasn't for you, Tom, we wouldn't have been here with doors open to welcome them. Would you feel happy if you got a call like that? You know, that's what we're talking about when we're saying, prove to me you have a need. In sharing the story of the donor's impact, I also proved to him at the same time that the need is there. All right. So we're going to talk now about how to create an awesome donor experience. And you know, there's a wonderful book by Penelope Burke that's called Dating Your Donors. And it's a good analogy, you know, because many of us tend, especially if you're in my generation, or dare I say the one ahead of me, you know, we were raised, especially in the Caribbean where I'm from, to be very formal. I'll never forget coming to the United States the first time and hearing somebody my age talk to my dad and call him Peter. That would never happen in Jamaica. He would have been Uncle Peter, even if they weren't related, or Mr. Peter, or Mr. Stevenson, you know? But we tend to be very casual in America, in our culture, and I love it because I think it means we're more approachable. But the funny thing is, it doesn't translate that way in our communications, you know? We can still be very stiff and formal, you know? Dear Mr. Lawrence, thank you for your gift of $5,000 via check number 12345, received on XYZ date, you know? We need to talk to donors like we're having a cup of coffee with them or we're talking to our parents, you know? Be very casual and authentic. And I think that's what I hear most when I go from one community to the next. As you can tell, I'm pretty casual myself. But people bond with you because they don't think that you're putting on airs. And guess what? The same is true of our donors. So the more authentic we can be is how the relationship is going to be built. So here's a series that I suggest for new donors. And I'm going to tell you a couple organizations that do it really well so you can try them out and see how they make you feel as a donor. So a few years ago, one of my consulting friends said to me, I came across this great donor experience. She says, and I made a small gift. We call it the mystery shoppers, and a lot of us consultants will do that. If I have a client, the first thing I do is go make a donation on their website, and I don't tell them I've done it. And I see how long it takes for them to say anything. I am still waiting on many, but it gives me an authentic point of reference to then say, well, these are the things we need to brush up on, you know? But she tells me, I made a gift, and within 30 minutes, the executive director of the group called me to welcome me to the family and asked me if I had any questions about how my donation would be used. And I said, get out of town. I said, are you serious? I've never heard of a nonprofit doing that. I'm paraphrasing what I really said. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this because I just couldn't believe that it was true. And I did, and my call came in 23 minutes. And it was exactly as she said. And the organization's name is Brittany's Hope. And it's spelled BRITTANY', Hope. I don't even remember what they do, guys, because honestly, I haven't paid that much attention. But when the executive director called, I listened to her spiel, and I was taking notes furiously because it was a crash course on how to make a donor feel loved and appreciated right. And at the end of the call, she asked me if I had any more questions, and I said to her, I have a confession to make. I'm a consultant, and I didn't believe a friend that you guys really treat donors this way, and I had to see it for myself. But kudos to you for having such a wonderful experience for donors. Now tell me how you did it, right? What she did was she used her database to send an email every time a new donor record was created. So if somebody had already given and they made a gift, she didn't get that notification. But if a new donor record was created, she received an email with the donor's name, phone number, and the amount that they had given. And that's how she does it, because she has a smartphone, and she immediately steps out of whatever she's doing to do that. She said, you won't believe how many staff we have here. 3. And they still managed to do it. Do you think they're still on my rotation roster for giving? Heck yeah. Give a monthly gift to them, and it's a small monthly gift, but that's a gift from a stranger who gave out a curiosity. Now imagine what happens if it's somebody in our own community, a neighbor that we do like this, or even from another community who supported us. So I always suggest, if you can, especially on giving days, like the big give that's coming up, have a bank of volunteers, including board members who are just there to do thank you calls, you know? And that's how you spread the wealth. We call them at Network for Good thankathons. And so every donor gets a thank you call. And at the end of the year, when we're gearing up for our year-end fundraising campaign, we do thankathons then too. Because when your appeal letter shows up in the mail and they remember, oh yes, just last week I heard from this organization, they called to say thanks. You think they're going to give to you first? Yes, they will, you know? So what happens after you send them the thank you call? Well, you're going to make sure you have either a thank you email or a thank you letter that goes out within 48 hours. And then if you really want to get savvy, you send them a welcome email. So remember, when you're dating somebody, you kind of reveal things in stages, right? That's exactly what an welcome series is for new donors. So the first email might be a, welcome to the family. We're so thrilled to have you join. Did you know that you can meet other family members by volunteering or joining us on social media or for a special event, whatever it is. The next one's going to come, hey, I had to tell you something so exciting happened today. And you tell an impact story. Even if that impact story happened a year ago, doesn't matter. The donor's hearing it for the first time today. And then the third email that goes out might be, hey, would you like to come to an event, or would you like to come for a site tour so you can see your gift at work? 99% of donors will never take you up on the offer, but you get full credit for inviting them. So, you know, and guess what the fourth email is? 3 touches between? There you go. Melissa had a question.
How do space goes out, Rachel?
Good question. So with a welcome series, I usually do them once a week for a month, you know? After that, I put them in my regular cycle. If you spread it out too long, then they might forget who you are in between, you know? But you don't want it to go like too close so that they think you're harassing them with unwanted emails. The goal is to keep a smile on your donor's face, you know? And the more you can do that, the better. So visuals are also important. A welcome packet. Now in the old days, we used to actually send a packet, you know those colorful folders that you send your first grader to school with, and there's a different color for every subject, and the red one's always for communications that need to come home. A welcome packet used to be a simple folder like that, with maybe an old issue of a newsletter put in there, maybe a profile of a board member, or you know, all the things that you would include in getting to know an organization, an old annual report or something like that. Well, these days, when I use the word welcome packet, it's not necessarily to mail a packet out. Though, if you're dealing with mature donors, that might still be the best way to get the information to them. A welcome packet could be a series that you deliver by email as well. But the point is, you have a series of communications that go out to help them get to know you. Lastly, you want to use what we call multi-channel communications to express gratitude and convey impact. So when we think about how we communicate with donors, there are a few traditional ways, like via US mail, which is what we call direct mail, or even an email. But we also have social media channels. And so if you have a lot of donors that are on Facebook, for example, Make sure you're putting impact stories and gratitude posts to those who subscribe to Facebook. Even if they go visit later on and they don't see it in the news feed right away, the point is it will be there. So when we say multi-channel, what we're really talking about is talking to them in different formats. The telephone is a channel. The print media is a channel. The newspaper, newsletters, tons of different channels. So now you might be asking, okay, well, what do I say on a thank you call? So I've given you a little script here that you could use, and Penelope Burke is also another member of the Geek Squad that likes to think all things analytics and geek out on nonprofit data. She's phenomenal. If you haven't seen any of her books, they are well worth the investment. But she says and has measured that donors that receive a thank you call within 48 hours of making a gift are 40% more likely to renew their gift next year. I like those odds. What about you? Pretty good, right? So it's simple. Hey, Rachel, this is Melissa Dyers at the Fremont Area Community Foundation. I just called to welcome you to the family and say how much we appreciate your gift on the Big Give Day. You really helped us maximize the matching gift from whoever it was. Do you have any questions about how your gift will be used? Most of them are going to say no, but they're shocked that you call them because most people don't take the time. And so this is how you distinguish yourselves from the competition. I know locally in a rural community, you only have a limited pool of donors, and there are a lot of nonprofits that are competing for those dollars from those donors. And so the best way to get those dollars is to make sure you are the best in the customer or donor appreciation business, and this is one great way to do it. Another great way to engage donors is to ask them follow-up questions. Some organizations will do it in a form of a survey that people can complete online. And you can ask open-ended questions, and you can also do this through phone calls, by the way. So in your follow-up to thank the donor for the first time, you could say, hey, I'm curious, what inspired you to give to so-and-so organization today, right? And then shut up and listen. Let them do the talking. Awkward pauses are your friend. People can't stand to hear them, and they'll usually give you more information rather than end them, So for talkers like me, that one is a struggle. But I've learned the less we talk and the more questions we ask and the more listening we do, the quicker the relationship grows. I also like to ask questions about a donor's interests and their family. Where do they work? When's their birthday? All the things you'd ask somebody that you're meeting on a first date and think, I really want to get to know this person, And here's why we ask those questions. So I met a donor. He's actually one of the major donors to a nonprofit that I co-founded 10 years ago. And he had been giving us, for us, big gifts, but what would be considered small gifts, $500 here and there. And I once scheduled a call with him to sit down and say, well, I want to get to know about your philanthropic legacy. It seems to me you're building one steadily. How can we help you? And so I asked him about his family. Where did you grow up? And out in the story came, he grew up in Pittsburgh in a very tough neighborhood. And his dad died when he was fairly young. And the only thing that he perceived that kept him out of jail was that his parents, or his mother, I should say, enrolled him in an after-school sporting program. So he had no time to get in trouble because he came home exhausted. And this guy builds casinos all over the world. Right now he has a huge hotel going up in Fort Lauderdale. And I had been approaching him about funding a breakfast program for 1,000 underprivileged kids at my brother's school in Jamaica. He's a Catholic priest in Kingston, and we have a real tough neighborhood, 100% of the school children are on, their parents can't even afford to give them shoes, much less feed them. And I was struck because he had no interest in that program, and yet he said education was his thing, and I couldn't figure it out. And it was in that conversation with that open-ended question, tell me about your family, where did you grow up, that I found the answer to the question. You know that donor for the last 8 years has been giving me $18,000 a year to underwrite a sporting program for at-risk kids after school. And it's improved their attendance, it's improved their attention in class, it's given them self-esteem. These kids are winning competitions that nobody that comes from a poor area like that ever wins. And so my angle into him changed to get that gift. And do we feed kids in that sporting program? Yep. So it was just a different way to get at the gift. And because we considered what he was interested in, the sporting part of it didn't cost us a whole lot, and it brought us results that we never even imagined. And so I'm not saying that we should shape our work around donors' interests, but listen to see what they're interested in, because chances are there's an angle to your work that would be of interest if you only knew how to ask. The reason we ask for birthdays, I don't know about you, but I lost my mom about 6 weeks ago, and my sister and I have been going through her stuff. And thank God my mother was not, well, I should say she was a pack rat all her life, but she dealt with her belongings before she passed, most of them. But you know, one of the things I noticed was the things that she held on to. And it was things like a thank you letter from a nonprofit that had helped, she had made a gift to that helped a kid. And the kid had sent a little drawing that they had made. And I couldn't throw it out. It's going down in the generations through. You know, those are the kinds of things that you want to connect with donors and share with them. And so for her memorial, we chose to honor the organization that made that happen. And that was our gift to her. So knowing their birthdays or something special can help you create giving occasions around that person's life. Birthdays are an easy one. Many of us, especially at mom's age, like for Christmas, she didn't want any more stuff. She knew her time was short. And so what she asked us to do was give her a gift to the nonprofit that she had worked for and cared about. So imagine if you could leverage that and have a giving day or donate your birthday campaign for your loyal donors. That's why the birthday matters. Now here's the logistics of that. Some of us are a little more sensitive about how many birthdays we've had than others, right? And so I always ask for the month and day of their birthday, but not the year. And I tell them, you know, around here, birthdays are a big thing. And we love to celebrate our staff's birthdays and our donors' birthdays. Would you mind telling me the month and day of your birthday so we can include you in our celebrations? And they'll always give you that. Now we're talking about welcome emails. So you've made the phone call, delighted them with the phone call. You've sent them the thank you acknowledgement with a great story to make them feel good about giving. Here's a simple email that you can send out as the first shot across the bow of the getting to know you dating ritual, right? Congratulations, you've taken a big step to put your mission in there. Whatever it is, the outcome, not output, but the outcomes of what you're achieving, you put there. We can't do what we do without your compassion. You know, make it all about what they're doing, not so much about what you're doing. And if you want an example of a fantastic organization email series, check out Charity Water. Has any of you heard of Charity Water? Or a few? Okay. Charity Water builds wells, primarily in developing countries that don't have access to clean and safe water. And they are the best in the industry at donor response as far as I'm concerned, and donor care. So you make a gift to Charity Water, then when they start digging the well, they send you an email. Hey, we started work on your well today. When the well is finished, they send you another email with a picture of the well with somebody pumping water out of it. I mean, who doesn't want to give more money to build more wells when you know that they're doing exactly what they said they would do? So this is another opportunity for a secret shopper. You know, make a small gift to Charity Water and watch the communications that come back. And think about it, even though your organization is different in mission and scope, there are bound to be lessons and things you can pull out. And in my world, I say that imitation is the best form of flattery. So, you know, make it yours, but keep the spirit of what they do, and you won't have to dream it up from scratch. The letter and the handwritten note, just like I shared with my mom, keeping that note that came, this is the I thought of you this morning story. So here's the script for it. You don't have to remember. You know, you can jot it down in a handwritten note. People love handwritten notes. especially people my age and like my parents' age. My kids think that it's something from a different planet. The thought of getting something in the mail that's not a bill is mind-boggling to them. But therein lies the power of the communication, because nobody else is sending them handwritten notes. And they learn to see, oh, wow, this is interesting. I'll tell you a funny story. On our team, there's Brian Lauterbach and myself. We're about the same age. And then we have our boy wonder, we call him. But he's really very talented and very mature, way beyond his years. We refer to him as the adult supervision when we go to conferences. He's very straight-laced and polite and, supervises us who would like to get in trouble. But Nate is 26 years old, but you would never know it talking to him, because he looks more like 40 in his maturity and just his demeanor. But he was making fun of me the other day because I sent a gift to a client, and I sent them brownies. And the reason I sent them was I had a colossal mess up. I totally messed something up. I don't know what I was thinking. I think it was just having too many things to do at one time. And the client wasn't very happy. But I sent them a card and brownies as atonement, and made a joke out of it. Here's a little sweetness to make sure, The client loved the brownies and told me, well, you know what, I was going to walk away, but I can't after those brownies. It was just so thoughtful of you to do that. So we always joke that the brownies go a long way. And when I'm telling this story to Nate, he says, brownies, I would never eat that, he's into fitness and hiking and marathons and things. He says, I'd much rather a Starbucks gift card. So we joke that it's a difference between the millennial generation and other generations. And so you want to be aware of that when you're relating to your donors too, Younger donors are much more likely to feel warm and fuzzy over a thank you text or an email that goes out or a Starbucks gift card than they are to the necessarily handwritten cards and so the language is different. If I sent my grandmother or my mother a text message to say thanks, I'd be in trouble, right? And so these are definitely meant for us to take note of in one generation to the other. Here's some cool correspondence that I've received and other people have received from organizations. This is an example of an email that was sent out, but it could very easily be a letter that's printed. And I gave you a hint of all the different pointers that make this a terrific response to donors. And don't worry, it's in the link to it is in the presentation, so you won't have to squint to read it as you do now. But you really want to make sure that the invitation feels like the donor is with you, and it's about what the donor is doing for the beneficiaries and less about you. And that's something that requires a little bit of a shift in our thinking. Traditionally, when we talk to donors, it's all about what we do, and it's very organization-centric. And that's why we struggle to raise money. And one of the things we need to realize is donors don't give to organizations. People give to people through your organization. So the more you remove your organization from the story and make it about what people are doing for people, the more money you're going to bring in. And I know this seems a little bit like an oxymoron, because how do we remove ourselves from the equation when we need to be the facilitator of things? And all I can tell you is it works, because donors don't like being pitched or sold to. They like to have that relationship built. So when you can help them build relationships or perceive relationships between them and the people you serve, they're going to want to give to you more. So I promised to tell you a little bit about the welcome kit. Again, this could be an email series or it could be a print series, because you may have some more mature donors that don't do well with email. As my eyes fade, that's certainly true of me. I like looking at printed things and holding onto a piece of paper as I read, because I find the computer screen a little distracting sometimes, especially since I work on it all day. But these are some of the items that you might want to include in a welcome packet. So if it's a physical packet, put them in there and send it off. Or if it's an email, use links. So load that content up on your website and use hyperlinks to drive them there to look at it. You don't want to send them as attachments to emails because they won't make it through the spam filter, Oops. All right, so As we talk to donors after the giving day, this is an example here of the multi-channel communications that I was referencing. You know, it might start out with a thank you call, then it might continue with a thank you letter, then you might send a newsletter showing impact. You can do printed content for anywhere from 4 to 12 times a year, depending on your size. So for me, working as a chief everything officer in a small organization, I'd be thinking, no way I can do 12 times a year. I can't even get an appeal letter out once a quarter, you know? Do what you can do and know that you have to right size it for your organization. Anybody in here work with a homeless rescue mission? Awesome. And do you guys send printed newsletters?
Yes.
How often do you send them?
It depends, 3 to 4 times a year.
And do you have an ask with the newsletter?
Yes, soft ask.
A soft ask. And how much money does it bring in to you, roughly?
It depends on which one. The year-end obviously brings
Yes.
more, but the ones throughout the rest of the year bring in 3 to 5,000.
And how much do they cost you to produce?
Around 1,200.
Perfect. So this is an exact example of the power of newsletters. Newsletters do 2 things for us. When we include the soft ask, then people will naturally give because they feel called to give. And that helps to offset the printing costs that go into doing it. But newsletters are really more about reporting impact to donors to secure future gifts. So even if you break even, that's a win. And to the extent that you're able to raise revenue from it, even better. One organization that does this exceptionally well is the Nashville Rescue Mission. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but that's another secret shopper opportunity for you, especially if you're a Rescue Mission employee. They do a phenomenal job. They have a lady who coordinates, her only job there is to create a monthly newsletter. They send it to about 60,000 households a month. They have a rather large mailing list. It costs them about $1 million a year to produce just because of postage and printing costs. Anybody want to take a gander at how much money it brings in for them? About $12 million. So they're a big scale organization using a newsletter effectively. So you don't need to start there. What I say that just to show you that they started somewhere and it has grown into a revenue generator for their organization. So if you can't manage 3 or 4 times a year, how about twice a year, you know? A spring and a fall edition. And all you're doing in that newsletter is profiling a success story, a volunteer, a donor why I give story, and then telling them about stuff you have coming back up. So newsletters that are printed still work. A lot of folks stay away from them because they can be expensive to produce. But they're well worth the money because you don't know how many emails are really being opened. You can see that maybe 30% of them are when you look at open rates in your software, but you don't necessarily know who's opened which one, especially if it's not all in one integrated system. You get a much higher open rate on a printed newsletter that somebody receives in the mail than you do on emails. And we have to keep that in mind because if a donor isn't opening our emails, in their mind, we didn't thank them. Don't mind that you sent 10 emails thanking them. If they didn't open it, they don't know you thanked them. You know, so that's a distinction I wanted to make with print and email. An annual report. How many of you do annual reports? Okay, anybody not do an annual report and want to do one? Okay. No, you don't want to do one. Well, I wouldn't want to do an annual report either. How many of you wish you could produce a gratitude and impact report for your organization? Anybody interested in that? Yeah, I should see a lot more hands going up. Annual reports sound old and boring, right? So I always tell my clients, how about sending a gratitude report? It's the same thing, right? And these days, people understand that it costs money to produce an annual report. And they're very good low-cost tools that you can do it. So for example, Canva, if you've ever heard of canva.com, CANVA.com, they have templates for everything. For every kind of blog post or social media post, banner image, they know the sizes for every social media platform. They even have excellent infographics. So one of my clients is a homeless prevention center in South Florida, and they are stretched to the limit, and they were going to do an annual report. I said, how about you let me give you an infographic annual report, and not even an annual report, an infographic gratitude report. It took me an hour to put together. I went into Canva, and all I needed was how many meals they served, how many hot showers the mobile shower unit did, how many families did they place in housing. And I just took all those, put visuals in them, a quick icon here and there that was garnered from another site that has very high quality, free licensed images that you can use, and sent it over to them. You think donors prefer to read that over an annual report? Absolutely. And you get the same credit. You're reporting back. So why not do it in a way that's easy to produce? And again, canva.com is a great resource, and it's a free tool. Special invitations a few times a year, another great way to steward donors. So maybe you have a VIP coffee hour with your executive director, and you bring in one of the families you've served, and they give a testimonial to donors about how the change that's happened in their life because they gave. This can be a real good way to have donors see your work up close and personally in a very respectful way. Because of course the client you select is going to be selected based on them opting in, and so it doesn't feel contrived as if they're on show. So we used to do this at New Life Family Shelter every year. Actually, we did it every quarter. We would have coffee with Tessa. She was the program director. And we would bring donors through and have one of the moms that was staying at the shelter talk about what it felt like to be able to live there. And our shelter was an apartment-style shelter. So each room had a bathroom and a bedroom, and then we had a communal area with a kitchen and place that they could hang out. And so we usually would have 1 or 2 clients in transition. So we'd have an empty room, and we would take donors into that empty room to show them this is where families come. And that is a really humbling experience for donors. When you see that, let's see, that room that we had was probably, I would say, 3 or 4 rooms would be equivalent to this room. So they're tiny. And we take them into the dining hall, and we show them that each family has its own refrigerator labeled with their name with a lock on it so nobody can steal it. You know, these are the things that help our donors understand the experience of the people we serve, and they wouldn't get it any other way through a letter. So if you can organize special invitations for site tours or coffee or whatever floats their boat, you know, that will only help you to build relationships. And then finally, on social media. Social media can be a huge time suck, you know, but like it or not, it's here to stay, and people spend more time on social media than they do reading the news or anything educational. So even if you don't want to be there, you have to be there. So the key is figure out where your donors are on social media. Chances are, if they're not millennials, they're on Facebook. If they are millennials, you better be on Instagram or Snapchat, you know, or Twitter. So knowing where they are helps you to prioritize those resources. If most of them are on Facebook, the good news is you only have to post a couple times a week, you know, and so you can schedule in advance to manage it. So there are tools out there to help you manage your social media and schedule ahead. But that's a whole nother class, which Stephen is going to teach you, so I'll skip that. So as we think about what this plan looks like as far as implementing it, I've thrown a lot of ideas out at you, but here's how we pull it all together. So I put together what I call touch points for communicating with donors. So in January, if you're anything like me, you don't want to have to go hunt for tax receipts to give to your accountant to figure out how much money you gave last year. What if we sent them an annual gift summary to do that, where it summarizes all their gifts? You know, those are things that donors appreciate. Next thing, in February, Valentine's Day comes. Has anybody ever gotten a card from a nonprofit on Valentine's Day? No? Well, you're missing out. So I have a client called Hope Outreach Center. They're a little organization in Davie run by a nun who still wears a habit. And she's Italian, and she's about to turn 80. And it's an all-white dress, all-white shoes, the white habit. And she's been running an after-school program for low-income kids for 25 years. And the kids love her, and she's so cute. I mean, she comes in and the kids go all over, hello, Sister Germana, and she has to hear all about their day, and then she sits them down for homework. Complete opposite of the nuns I went to school under, who were more of the ruler kind, you know, get in line or you're in trouble. But last year, we wanted to do something different for our major donors, and one of the things I came up with was Sister Germana's 5th grade class. For the first time in 25 years, every child had made the honor roll. And she was so excited because one of the kids had a learning disability as well. So after school, I went with my iPhone and I took a picture of Sister with the kids making hearts, because Hope has a heart logo. And I did a simple card that went out in the mail. And all it had on the front is the picture that I took of Sister and the kids, and it said Happy Valentine's Day. And then on the inside, it had another picture of Sister and the kids. And on the left side of the card, it said simply, for the first time, every LEAPS is the name of their program, every LEAPS 5th grader made the honor roll. And on the right side of the card, it said, Dear Melissa, behind every life changed is someone who cares. We're happy our special someone is you. Happy Valentine's Day. And I uploaded the signatures of the kids into this card, and here's the cool thing. It's a tool that I use to do it. So it puts a card in Sister's handwriting. It's a font that's created to match her handwriting. It uses mail merge features. And so these donors thought that Sister had handwritten every single one of those cards and got the kids to sign them. So about a week or two afterwards, the executive director calls me and she says, Rachel, I have a problem. I said, what? She says, we're in trouble. I had a donor call and she really reamed me out because her mother got a card and she didn't. What am I supposed to tell her? I said, well, if you really want to impress her, you could tell her, give you more money and she'll get one next year, you know. I said, but since we can't do that, how about you tell them you have a new development director, they made a mistake with the list and she was accidentally excluded, but you'll happily send her one. And then go into your database and flag her as a major gift donor, even though she isn't, so that every time her mother gets something, she'll get something, you know. But 9 months later, when Sister went to visit that donor, guess what was on the refrigerator? The card. Do you think she thinks about that organization every single time she opens her refrigerator? You better believe it. You know how much that card costs with postage? $1.65 and per donor, and we didn't have to lick it, stick it, or lug it to the post office. So these are ways that you can work smarter, not harder, to get attention. So imagine if you segmented your database or your group of donors so that all your top donors on Valentine's Day received a card like that. And when else would be a good time to send them a card? Christmas? Mm-mm. Birthdays, when else? How about Thanksgiving? You know? So we had a campaign. So essentially we had a 3-card campaign that went out. Initially it was 3 cards, and then we added 3 more. So the 3 cards were a birthday card, a Valentine's Day card, and a Thanksgiving card. And the Thanksgiving card message was simple. This is a time of year we pause to count our blessings. We want you to know we're counting you twice. I mean, is that going to make a donor smile? It sure will. And guess what we hit them with a week or 2 after Thanksgiving? The year-end appeal. Are they going to be feeling good about us because we just sent them a card? Absolutely. And so it's about creating that automation in there. And so the tool I use, which if you give me your business card, I'll be happy to share with you, is one that allows you to create what we call a drip campaign. It's a series of cards that go out on a timed sequence. So literally every year at Christmas time, when I get off of work between Christmas and New Year, I sit and create 6 cards, a 6-card campaign for the next year. There's birthday, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, and then 3 impact stories. Simple impact stories. And I time those to go out based on when my newsletter and appeal letters are not going out. And so that donor, or major gift donor, is being touched about every 4 to 6 weeks. But it's not with asks, you know, so it's a very good mix of communications. In March, you'll already have touched them with a thank you letter or a tax receipt, Valentine's Day gift card, and another impact story. So guess what? You can ask them for more money in March, right? There's 3 touches between asks. In April, we'll send them a thank you with a success story. In May, we might do a newsletter that talks about what's happened so far in the year and exciting events coming up. Any of you serve kids? Yep. Back to school is your friend. How about a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign for back to school expenses if you help families? We do that every year, and we probably when I was with Catholic Charities, we would probably bring in about 200 new donors just on peer-to-peer fundraising, and it was a small project. In the second half of the year, we're going to rinse and repeat. Thank you story in July, maybe another newsletter, a summer edition, or early fall. Some organizations like to send out their appeal letters in September. You know, some like to do it later on. It doesn't matter as long as you get one out. October, we want to send a thank you with a success story. November, a Thanksgiving card, and boom, in December you can hit them again. So this is a rotation that gives you 3 solicitation opportunities for the whole year. And so this is how we build those relationships with the donors and make them feel part of our organization so that they don't only give on giving days, but they become loyal donors. Here are some resources that I use all the time. The first one, 20 phrases that make donors feel like heroes. I have that one printed out and glued to my bulletin board at home because whenever I'm writing appeal letters or thank you letters for my customers, that's where I look. A couple more. Fridge-worthy thank yous and a free thank you letter you can swipe. And the greeting card tool that I referenced is that link there. Click to delight your donors with greeting cards. If you want to use that, you can click the link and send a free one. And send yourself a card or send a donor, even better, send a donor a card that you think doesn't know how much they're appreciated and then see what happens, you know? As you're looking through your storytelling, we have another tool that I'll be happy to share with you. We call this our donor retention toolkit. And the toolkit is really just an Excel spreadsheet that asks you questions. And what you can't see here is that when you fill in the answers to those questions, it has tabs along the bottom with suggested emails that plug those answers in for you. So this can be a great way to help you get started. And so now I'm going to stop and pause and see if you have any questions about anything that I've said, because I've done a lot of talking. Anybody have any questions? Oh my goodness, I didn't put them to sleep and no questions. All right. What I'd like to share with you now is a program that Network for Good and the foundation are thinking about bringing to your community. No final decisions have been made yet. But we're going to look to you to help us decide if this is something you need or that you think could be beneficial. And it's a program that's called Jumpstart Fundraising. And I'll tell you a little bit about it and then share with you. So Jumpstart Fundraising is a program where Network for Good pairs a coach with you and your staff. And so the goal of the coach is really to help take a look at what resources do you have to work with, what constraints do you have to work within, and then helping you come up with what we call a right-size financial strategy or a fundraising strategy for your organization. So the way I like to say this in Miami is, you know, many of us work for organizations that have executive directors that decide, oh, we need you to raise $1 million this year, just because that's how much they want to spend. But it has no basis in reality as how much you're capable based on what you've raised so far. And so that's what we mean by right size. The coach is going to help you look at how much you've raised in the past from different sources and then see what would be a reasonable prediction of what you could raise this year and how are you going to get there. So think of it as a roadmap. And then we give you strategies for engaging your board and getting your board involved in helping you fundraise. Anybody in here have a fundraising board where they raise lots of money for you? Pretty typical, right? We wish they did. So we're going to give you strategies for how to engage your board. In many cases, when boards don't fundraise, it's simply because either they don't know or they weren't taught. You know, if they take the time to serve on your board, they're already passionate about your cause, or maybe they're just building resumes and they need to learn how to be passionate about your cause. Either way, your coach is going to help you to engage your board and empower them to fundraise for you. But we're also going to teach you how to diversify your funding through donors, foundations, businesses, and the wider community. One of the ways we do that is we have online giving pages that are optimized for conversion. So what that means is when we build a fundraising page through Network for Good's platform, it only asks donors for the information they need to process the gift. I don't know how many of you have had this experience. You click donate on an organization's website, and then the page of information they give you or to fill in is about this long. And you think it's going to take me 10 minutes to finish that and fill it out. Forget it, I'm done. On to the next. You know, so that's one of the things we test in building this platform. We only ask donors for the information we actually need to process the transaction. So for example, when my mom passed away, we directed all of her memorial gifts to Food for the Poor because she worked there for 10 years. And their website just asks for the minimum information as well, but if they were a Network for Good customer, when you hit tribute gift, only then would you see the additional fields to say who's it in honor of, who should we notify, and all those things. So they're not just put out there for people to skip over. We only show them what they need to know. Why this matters is 60% of contributions now come in on a mobile device, whether it's a cell phone or a tablet of some sort. And so when we minimize what we present to folks, it tends to raise the conversion rates in terms of how many of them actually hit submit so the transaction can be processed. We also have smart pages that respond to how the person accesses your donation page. So if it's an Android or an iPhone, it loads a mobile phone version of your donation page and it auto-detects, so the user or donor doesn't even know. Same thing for tablets and computers. It will adjust the screen size for you. We also ask donors or encourage them to become monthly donors. So it can be a great way for you to get recurring gifts. And then we're going to give you a database on the back end that has guidance on statistics. So when you have to track, for example, how your fundraising is going, there are charts that you can literally screen grab and throw in a Microsoft Word document to impress your board and make them think that, wow, you're tracking all these things, you're data-driven, you know, and really impress them. But more importantly, the donor management system allows you to keep track of information about your donors so you can build relationships with them, you know. So I have a note field in mine, so when somebody tells me that their grandson went to Purdue, I put that in there because the next time I talk to them, I'm going to say to them, hey, how's your grandson at Purdue doing? Did he graduate yet? Knowing, well, the donor will think, wow, you remembered that? No, I didn't. I just had a really good database. So the coaching, along with the coaching, you get a library of templates, and that's meant to help you deploy things more quickly. So for example, if your coach tells you, you know, you really need to have a fundraising plan to present to your board, we have a spreadsheet in the template library that you can download that allows you to plug and play numbers to show the board exactly how you're going to accomplish what we say we're going to do together. So just from a show of hands, how many of you feel like if you had a coach to help you, the template library and the software all the way, that you could raise a little more money for your missions? Yep, anybody who think that wouldn't be helpful? All right, we win, Melissa, we win. So in the follow-up to this meeting, Melissa's going to send you a little survey, and that's linked to that survey. If you could take a few minutes just to tell us a little bit about your organization, if you think that you would benefit from receiving a grant to underwrite the cost of this program so you can not only build your own capacity as an executive director or staff member, you can build the capacity of your board and even have them included on the coaching calls. Please fill out the survey, because what we need that information for is to show Melissa's board and the Network for Good's board that there's need in this community. And once we prove the need, it's going to help us to leverage those dollars to pull together a grant that you could be eligible for. So if you could indulge me, I promise you, you won't be disappointed. All right. Anybody else have any questions? No? Well, please connect with me online. I love to stay in touch. So, you know, when you receive the presentation, all these links are there. So if you ever have a question or I can do anything to help you at all, I'm here for you. Please don't hesitate. And I hope you'll stick around, and I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.